is pretty much the theme of the talk. First of all, I'm going to talk about what is impact, and in the UK, our research councils have some strict definitions for this, and then ask the question: why should I or the audience care whether my research has an impact? And then, based on whether you answer the question yes, it should care as an impact, is how do I go about increasing that impact? And then I'll go on to this case study that I've entitled Prawns on Prozac, after a newspaper article actually had given my research that headline. So the first question, what is impact? So the research councils of the UK, RCUK, give it a demonstrable contribution to excellent research makes to society and the economy, either by fostering global economic performance and specifically the economic competitiveness, increasing the effectiveness of public services and policy, and enhancing the quality of life, health, and creative output. Now, just to give you an example, if one thinks about a piece of research that may have been published today on processed meat might cause an increase in cancer, it would have been nice to, and I'm sure people do, have the recorded figures on sales of processed meat this week compared to last week before the result came out. And then you would have an impact of your science that you can demonstrate because it's in sales figures of processed meat sales. And the Research Council of the UK have this nice little figure here where you can look at what we traditionally think of what the academic impacts are in orange, and then what are the economic and societal impacts in green. So if we think of the realm that we're used to dealing in science in terms of where we incrementally move knowledge on through our science and publish our science in publishers like Elsevier, or we may present our research in conferences, we may train students, graduates, undergraduates. This is all the impact that the sphere of impact that we're used to dealing with. But our science has always had an impact on economy and society. But what the new agenda is across many research councils in many different countries is maximizing the impact that we do in the academic sphere over to the economic and societal sphere, if you like. So whether it be a piece of technology that you've developed, how can that be commercialized, incorporated into a product? How can the science that you do have health benefits for society? How can the science that you do be converted into policy in governments, which then invoke a change, or how can the science that you do change human behavior in a way that improves their own lives, society, etc. So in green, I won't go through them all today, but you've got a whole range of different ways in which science can impact the economy and society. So the impact agenda is to deliver the widest range of benefits for the economy and society, recognizing that there is a knowledge exchange between academia, the public services, and the third sector, or industry, if you like. And what it is getting the scientists to do is think about how can this knowledge exchange be maximized? How will the public services or industry ever get to know about your research if you don't disseminate it and communicate it in a good way? There again, are you going to be disseminating, communicating your research to the right audience? And again, this depends on who do you want to have an impact on: politicians, the industry, the public. So if you think of that in advance, you can set about an agenda to maximize that impact. The impact agenda also provides the recipients with the flexibility and autonomy to deliver their research, postgrad training, or knowledge exchange tailored to their projects, because not everybody's impact is going to be the same. So if you're a biomedical science that's trying to find a cure for a particular disease, your impact is going to be very different to somebody that's designing a nanotechnology that may go into a computer chip and be used for another product. So what your science is and what you're trying to get an impact from will be very different, and the pathway to getting that impact is going to be very different as well. And the third thing to recognize is the fact that not all research will have a direct impact. It might not immediately be practical, and that's because some research is more applied than others. So there is curiosity versus applied research as well that we must take into consideration. So why should I care about whether my research has an impact? So I suspect the majority of people listening to this all want their research to some way answer questions. We're all inquisitive people. We're all trying to expand the knowledge, incrementally take forward science in some direction. But what I'd like you to think about is, what are the other advantages to having an impact with your science? Well, it may impact your success as a researcher, because if the grant agencies are making it clear that your science must have a demonstrable impact, you must think about that when applying for your grant and demonstrate that to them. So, and if you do that successfully, that might improve your success in obtaining funding for doing your research, and then therefore your career as a whole. The other thing where it might be advantageous is the fact that if you think that your research has an impact to a wide variety of people, it opens up the sphere of funding that you can get, rather than just obtaining maybe government research funding. If you think your research might have an impact on industry, why not go to that industry and ask them for funding as well? So does your research have a commercial application? If so, you might be able to obtain funding elsewhere. But is there a societal or cultural perspective to your research? You might be able to get your funding from a completely different funding source if it does. And finally, it helps you frame your publications to an appropriate reader, and it helps you answer the so what question when you research. Very often we can get bogged down in our own research when writing a publication and not think of the bigger picture. And if you're able to think about the bigger picture and answer the so what question, what is the impact of this research, you might be able to frame a better narrative through your paper, make it a lot more readable for people to digest. So very often now, and certainly in the UK, when you're writing a grant application, you have to write an impact summary and the pathways to impact. And within the impact summary, you would have to write about who might benefit from the research and how might they benefit from this research. And then write a pathways to impact, stating what will be done to ensure that the potential beneficiaries have the opportunity to benefit from this research. And this goes back to a point I mentioned earlier. If you think this might have an impact on the behaviour of the public, maybe how they dispose of waste, for instance, unless the general public don't get to know about that research, how is it going to be a benefit to them? So what is the pathway to making sure that the public or the politicians or the industry, society as a whole, get to know about that research so you can change that behavior, change that policy, or get your new bit of technology incorporated into something that might be useful, either economically or societally? So hopefully I've convinced you that impact is an important issue that we should consider as scientists. So how can we go about increasing the impact of your science? Well, first of all, as I mentioned on the earlier slide, first identify who your research may have an impact on. Because not until you can do that, then you can set up a strategy to maximize that impact. So one way that you could do it is certainly by going onto the Elsevier publishing campus, and there's lots of great talks on there about getting your science noticed or telling your research through audio slides. There's lots of great information on there about getting your science out there. So I would certainly encourage people, if you haven't already looked at these talks, to go in and delve into some of the previous ones. One way that you could do it as well is engage with your press office. you may want them to do a press release on your science article. And on the right-hand side of this slide, it's an example press release that I did last year on our Prawns and Prozac research. But the thing that you have to remember is you may be in a university that produces thousands of articles a year. So in a way, you have to sell your article to your press office. So you have to make it interesting to them. Because if you can't make your article interesting to your press office, how can you expect them to write a press release or help you write the press release to sell the article to a wider audience, such as the media? So help them by thinking through the significance and impact of your research yourself. And one way of doing that is answering the 5 W's, the who, what, why, when, and then that might help you sort of design your press release. Another way is your publisher has may be interested in doing a press release on your article as well. So if you think that your science may have an impact, why not get in contact with your publisher and see if they're interested in promoting your research? And once you do that, your science might get printed in the print media, it might get represented in television media, or more increasingly, it might get noticed on social media. And the social and the TV and print media don't occur in isolation either. Very often when one appears in one, it gets translated to another, and it can go both ways. Sometimes a story can go viral on social media and as a result end up in print or television media, or vice versa. It can end up in the print media and television media and then get pushed forward through Facebook or Twitter or many of the others through to social media. And that way you've got an incredible reach then to society as a whole, due to the millions of people using these forms of communication every day. So I'll move on now to this case study, Prawns on Prozac. Now this started with a publication that we published in Aquatic Toxicology back in 2010, and the article was entitled "Antidepressants Make Amphipods See the Light." And this was based on the fact that we knew that antidepressants were being detected in water. And on the right-hand side here, you've got some tablets of fluoxetine, and one of the common names given to this antidepressant drug is Prozac, which is some people might be more familiar with. Now, antidepressants aren't alone in some of the drugs that we might find detected in water. Wastewater effluent can contain thousands of different types of pharmaceutical drugs, from contraceptives, headache pills, cholesterol-lowering drugs, antibiotics, antihistamines, as well as illegal drugs. And a lot of these drugs, when we consume them, don't get fully broken down within us. They end up in a sewage treatment plant where they also don't get fully broken down, and then they get put straight back in the nearest stream after sewage treatment. So we were interested in what the effects of antidepressants might be on the life that might live in rivers and streams and down in the estuaries. And this isn't the first time people have looked at this. For about 20 years, we've known that the contraceptive pill, which contains a synthetic estrogen and natural estrogens that come out of wastewater, can feminize fish. On the right-hand side of the slide here, you can see a histological section through a testes from a fish, and it's developing ovarian tissue. It's developing eggs within that tissue. And we know that this occurs in incredibly low concentrations of synthetic and natural estrogens in water. Another example, which has been quite dramatic, is a 90% reduction in vulture populations in India and Pakistan. And this was caused by a drug called diclofenac. And this drug is used with humans as well. It can be used as a topical cream that you might put on your back if you've had a bad back or have some muscular or skeletal pains. And it's an anti-inflammatory. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. And in India and Pakistan, it was given as a veterinary drug to lame cattle. And what was unknown at the time was the vultures that might eat these cattle once they die would develop renal failure as a result of eating the contaminated cattle, which then killed off 90% of the population. So here it is, this drug that was primarily developed for human use, transferred to veterinary use, and it resulted in a 90% reduction in a bird population. So there you have an impact just there, a significant impact on a bird population, which in some ways forms a service as well to those countries, because they can strip those dead cattle bare within a very short period of time, and without those birds performing an ecosystem service or of eating the dead meats, then there are cattle left to rot without being eaten by these birds. So then, coming on to the study that we did, the basis of the study was very pure science. And as you can see on this slide, this is an amphipod, and these little critters occur in marine and freshwater environments. There's tens of thousands of different species of them, and the one that we were looking at lives in an estuary. But if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, there's 3 arrows pointing at what are parasites that are occurring in the body of these little shrimp. Now, I knew of research that suggested that when these parasites insist in the brains of these shrimp, that it increases the likelihood that they'll swim to the light. This parasite makes them swim to the light, whereas they prefer to be living under seaweeds and stone. And we know from other studies that the parasite does this by increasing the serotonin in the brain. So this slide that I'm just putting the cursor on now, this is a brain that's been dissected out of one of these very small shrimp. They're only about 1 centimeter long, and it's been labeled for serotonin in a greeny yellow color. And what the researchers noticed, that the serotonin increases in the brains of these little shrimp when they're infected with a parasite. The significance of this is that these shrimp can be up to 24 times more likely to be eaten by this fish that you can see on the bottom left-hand side of this slide as a result of having the parasite. The parasite deliberately manipulates the brain chemistry of the shrimp so it changes its behavior and swims out into the light rather than stays protected from predation in the dark under stones and gravel and in the seaweed. So as a result of these studies, we started to wonder whether these drugs that we find in the environment, these antidepressants, which were designed to elevate the same hormones and neurochemicals in the brains of humans, could they also have the same effect on wildlife? So this is a figure that was taken out of the study that we did. The top graph, the red bars, if I can click the cursor on, you can see there, that is demonstrating the phototaxis activity of these particular shrimp. The red bars is when they have a parasite. The blue bars are when they don't have a parasite. So you can see from this graph, when they have the parasite, they're a lot more attracted to the light. We give them a lot higher phototaxis score than when they don't have the parasite. So we wanted to confirm that serotonin has a role in this shrimp's ability to be attracted to the light. So the second set of graphs below shows an increase in serotonin that we would put in the water, and then you have a gradual increase in the attractiveness to the light by these particular animals. That was with the natural neurohormone serotonin, and then at the bottom we have the drug fluoxetine, or commonly known as Prozac. And when we increase the concentration of this in the water, it increased the attractiveness of these shrimp to the light. But what happened quite dramatically is we found that the effects of which it did this were the concentrations that can be found in many rivers and streams around the world that have got a high effluent load going into them, and drugs from wastewater not being fully treated.